Hello everyone, this is Dr. Mia. Welcome to my Sage and White Mage healing guide for the Epic of Alexander. We'll go through a VOD of my recent rank 1 kill I did as Sage. I healed with a White Mage co-healer, and in the video description you can find a spreadsheet of our healing and mitigation plan, with timestamps and notes about the healing. During the video you might see some White Mage heals that slightly differ from the plan, as the clear shot was recorded during 6.0, before White made changes that allowed us to improve the healing plan for P1 and P2. As for the first phase of the fight, here in the video you see I'm gonna apply Eucrasian Diagnosis to 3 targets. That is no longer needed as per 6.1 changes, where you start the fight with Adderskull. So you can simply Zoe and Eucrasian Prognosis before pull. In the first 20 seconds of fight there isn't really much to do as healer. The first tank buster on the tank, especially if you have a warrior, can be handled by only tank CDs and maybe Cardia. So until the 20-second mark where there is the cast of Cascade. On Cascade, you want to use Kerachol right before the cast ends, and Ixochol in the GCD right after. Here the White Mage can use asides, since it hits 2 targets and deals the group. It is not required, it is enough. Kerachol and Ixochol are enough to deal with Cascade. The White Mage can indeed hold asides to use it during dolls. This allows the White Mage to hit 4 dolls and the bosses, and it helps dealing damage to the dolls, so the DPS can hold more resources to hit the bosses. But this is entirely up to your group, so if the group doesn't want the asides, you can use it right after the Cascade. Here on the Tornado baits, we use the Tanking Wound to bait 1 Tornado, so the warrior was taking the tank busters from both bosses and baiting 1 Tornado. This allowed us to have only 2 targets to heal from the baits, which was me, and I used Haima on myself, and the Summoner, who used his own shield. If you need to heal the Protean bait targets, for example, if you have a 3rd DPS doing the 3rd Tornado, you can spare a Taurochol, and the White Mage can definitely use Benison and or Tetragrammaton. Those are pretty free. Right after the baits, it's important that both healers rush to the center of the arena. As Sage, you can use Toxicon to move. And here I used both Physis 2 and Holos right away, that basically fill up the party and apply the first 10% mitigation from Holos. My White Mage here used Plenary Indulgence and 2 Lilies. In the video you'd see a Medica 2 that we took away after the White Mage changes that allow the White Mage to use 2 Lilies in this phase. Right after you go to the middle, you'll have Kerachol and Ixochol coming off cooldown after you use them on Cascade. And you can basically use them right as soon as they are ready, because the doll feed should start about now, and you'll have Kerachol ready to cover most of the feeds, as well as Ixochol. Here the Rhizomata usage is free. You can use Rhizomata and sit on the Adderskull, or use the Adderskull for a Druo or a Taurochol on a tank if it's needed. Also Soteria is free, so whether if your tanks need healing, you can use 1 stack of gold and Soteria as well. From now on, White Mage should use asides of cooldown. If the White Mage used the asides during dolls, it will be ready later during the splashes. Otherwise, it will be ready about around now, pretty much. Here for the splashes, we're gonna use Asylum from the White Mage and Temperance. Basically, all the White Mage does here is popping wings and putting Asylum down. This Asylum will be buffing the Sage's heals. I will use Panaima and Kerachol. These 4 cooldowns pretty much carry the group over the splashes by themselves. There is no extra healing needed. After the Cascade, you can use a free Ixochol to help filling up the HP bars a little bit. We were killing P1 here during Ezunas, pretty much, so we skipped the whole Protean baits phases afterwards. If you're killing later and you have to do the Protean baits, Passage, you have Physis 2 and Kerachol coming up, so you can use both of them. While the White Mage doesn't have a lot of resources left, they will have one Lily left, and probably the White Mage will need to use a Medica 2 to make sure the group doesn't die. Also, the tanks will be in a rough spot from now on, so maybe a regen will be needed, depending on how much health they have after the cascade. Once phase 1 is over, it's limit cut time, and what you want to do right at the start of limit cut is to give one Eucrasian Prognosis to the group, while the White Mage can use a Medica 2 and the leftover Lilies. Once you recognize what's your number and you start running, you want to start using Eucrasian Diagnosis on yourself and possibly on the number that's running, one of the numbers that are running with you. You want to generate 3 addressing charges. So the best strategy, I think, is use the first shield on yourself, then one on someone else of the people that are running with you, and then another shield on yourself after you take the first damage during the limit cut. This way you have 3 guaranteed addressing for phase 2. And some health left over, of course. Right at the end of limit cut, when you go to the middle, here you can do an Eucrasian Prognosis with Ixochol and Kerachol, and then another Eucrasian Prognosis as soon as the ads appear, since the shield will snapshot after the J-Kick, and you still have the shield up after they become targetable. My White Mage used the Swift Cast Cure 3 and the Medica 2 during downtime while they were not targetable. After they are targetable, all you really want to do in this beginning phase is use a Physis 2 on the Whirlwind cast, since it will help the tanks staying alive. The group doesn't really need healing because the next damage you receive is the Photon, that will bring everyone to 1 HP, but the tanks actually take a lot of damage in this phase. So while one tank will have Cardia, and the tank will be fine, the other tank might have issues, so Physis 2 is really nice. Here we're going back middle for the Photon, where everyone goes to 1 HP. Here it's important to note that we do have a warrior. Having a warrior means he's just gonna use Shake It Off. Because here after Photon you want everyone to have a shield, since the Nisi damage is still ticking. So since everyone is at 1 HP, if the Nisi dot ticks right after Photon, people can die, and people will die indeed without a shield. So if you have a warrior, they can just shake it off and it's fine, you don't have to do anything. If you do not have a warrior, you're probably in charge to apply this shield. Probably the best choice here is to use Panaima, otherwise you can use an Eucrasian Prognosis. Although it's a real waste to use a GCD heal here just for a little shield for this little dot, so maybe using Panaima is the best choice, although you will not have Panaima later, when it's pretty handy actually, but it is what it is. Just play with a warrior, it's great. So after the Photon, what I'm doing is use Ixochol, Olos, and then a Kerachol, while my White Mage is doing Plenary Indulgence with 2 Lilies, pretty much, and Asylum on the floor. You can use just 1 Lily actually here, depending really on what you prefer. It's important for White Mages, especially after the buff in 6.1, sorry, to maximize the use of Lilies, since at level 80 are DPS gain over Glare, even on 1 target, and the P1 and P2 of T obviously have 2 targets, so it's a great DPS gain, so you really want to use all of these Lilies. So you either use 2 Lilies here on Photon, or 1 right after the water hits. Anyway, even just 1 Lily is enough to fill up everyone after the Photon, since you're gonna be putting a lot of potency with Ixochol, Olos, and Kerachol. Also, obviously, Kera and Olos will be a 20% mitigation for the incoming water damage that will be either on you or on your co-healer. Basically, yeah, White Mage can use the Lily to move here, it's really comfortable. regardless of the strat you're gonna do, you have to move away from the water damage, so a Lily for movement is great. Here I usually use the Panaima on a tank, since tanks are gonna take a lot of damage doing the mines, and especially the tank that will have ice will need some care. So Aima is pretty good to make sure the tanks are full HP when the damage starts. Right after the enumerations, I'm gonna do Ixochol into Kerachol pretty much as soon as they are off cooldown. Ixochol to make sure everyone is full HP before second water, and Kerachol to mitigate it, obviously. Once Brute Justice starts casting Flamethrower, it's indication you might want to use Panaima if you didn't use it during Photon. Using Panaima right at the end of the cast of Flamethrower guarantees that this Panaima will shield the group for the Whirlwind that will happen soon. And it will reshield after the Whirlwind, and the remaining stacks will pop after the Whirlwind damage, healing up the group. The timing is pretty lenient, like you just use it after Whirlwind, after Flamethrower, sorry, and it will be fine. And it's really great since you take a lot of efficiency out of Panaima. As long as people are in range, obviously. After the Whirlwind, even during the cast of Whirlwind, you can use this Physis 2 already to apply the regen and buff, and right after the Whirlwind cast, you can use Ixochol and Kerachol as soon as they are off cooldown. This will ensure the group to be full HP and mitigated for the incoming third water. As per the White Mage has a very free use of Lilies. Since now they only have 20-second charge time, so the White Mage can basically keep pumping Lily healing throughout P2. At this point, the group will take the water damage, but from now on, the group will no longer take damage basically in this phase. So you just go into your position beside the ice. All you have to care about are tank HP bars. Here I personally use one Torochol or Druochol on the tank that does not have Cardia, and activate Soteria for the Cardia tank. Depending on how much the damage they are actually taking, you can use a little more resources. What's great is that Asylum comes back off cooldown here, and it's really good if the White Mage uses it, not so much for healing the group, because again the group is not gonna take damage this phase, but it will definitely help the tanks sustain the bosses auto-attack. Here the bosses will bring both tanks HP to 1, and right after there is a big tank buster from Brute Justice. Here we usually killed at least Brute Justice before the tank buster, so we never really had to heal them. But if your group is killing them a little bit slower and the tanks are gonna take the tank buster, you can heal one of the two tanks with Benediction, and then use Taurochol or Druochol plus Tetragrammaton and Benison on the other tank, since they are free and you have Rhizomata off cooldown, so you definitely will have enough stacks of Gal to heal the remaining tank. After this, actually, there is the Super Jump and the Whirlwinds even after the Tank Buster. I think it's hard right now with how much damage DPS and ERs and tanks are dishing out in Endwalker to be able to see the Whirlwinds. But in case something happened during P2 and you're having a very long kill time, you can get to Whirlwinds with whatever is left basically. You will have Kerachol up, you probably have Ixochol up, and the White Mage should have at least one Lily ready and Plenary Indulgence, so you can basically dump everything to survive the Whirlwinds, which damage is not that high anyway. Once P2 is over, it's P3 time. This phase will have most downtime, and there will not be actually any damage during uptime until after Wormhole, so it's really relaxing as healer because you can just GCD heal as much as you want. You can use Eucrasian Prognosis before the time stop happens, and once the time stop resolves, yeah, the group is not full HP, but you are in no rush to heal everyone, so because there's gonna be no damage, you can use a Physis 2 and then Ictochol just to fill everyone up, because, well, it's free. The tank buster here can be dealt by tanks with Invuln easily. Here it was 6.0, so my white mage needed to Benedict the Dark Knight, but as per the 6.1 changes, Dark Knight can cleanse the Living Dead alone, so you don't really need Benediction here. When the Inception starts, you can use another Eucrasian Prognosis and just focus on executing the mechanic, as there will be no real damage, at least at the start. After the orbs and the crystals are done, you can just rush north and use anything you have, so Eucrasian Prognosis and Holos, for example, here I'm using, and my white mage is using Temperance with free GC dealing, as the boss is not here. Even after the Flamethrower, just Ixochol and Eucrasian Prognosis again, and make sure to heal up everyone if someone was not in range for the heals. And for the share, I'm gonna use Kerachol with Eucrasian Prognosis and Physis 2 again when we do the Cruise Chaser baits. Here you can basically use whatever you have, however you want, it doesn't really matter, since everything will be up again after Wormhole anyway. Once again, here there is just 30 seconds of hitting the boss, and one tank using Invuln to take the tank buster. So you can just have fun with those doses and Phlegmas. As per the beginning of Wormhole, it's obviously good to use one Eucrasian Prognosis, just to make sure everyone has enough health and shields. And it also allows people to have more HP at the end of Wormhole, which is really important. Actually, you can, I'm not doing this here, but you can keep using Eucrasian Prognosis and Pepsis or normal Prognosis during Wormhole to start giving some HP to the people on your side. It's not really important or necessary, but it costs nothing and it can help a little bit. For the share after the Wormhole, here I'm gonna use Zoe, Eucrasian Prognosis and Ixochol, while my white mage is gonna use a Plenary Swiftcast Cure 3 to make sure that we're all full HP. Then I'm gonna use another Eucrasian Prognosis with Pepsis, so transforming the shield into heal, and then another Eucrasian Prognosis to leave the shield up for the first Mega Oli, while my white mage is gonna apply the Medica 2. It's really important for Mega Olis to have your mitigation plan well fleshed out in the group, because the damage is still incredibly high. I use only Kerachol that covers both Mega Olis, while the white mage is gonna fill us up after the first Mega Oli with a Cure 3 and a Lily, and just a Medica 2 after the second one. After the second Mega Oli, when Alexander is going to jump away, I'm gonna use Holos to make sure everyone is full, and to mitigate the impact of the ads flying down, well, Brute Justice basically, which is pretty impactful because the J-Waves are starting. Here I'm basically using Physis 2 into Panaima that will carry us the first 4 to 5 J-Waves by themselves. Ixochol is free whenever you need it, and I'm gonna hold Kerachol for the later J-Waves that will start hitting real hard. The more this phase lasts, the less you can actually do, because sadly Sage's GC dealing potency is really low, and once you used all of your kit to soak the first 6 to 7 8 J-Waves, the white mage will really need to start doing the heavy lifting. I think the best way to approach this is for the white mage to hold Temperance, Plenary Indulgence for the 7th, 8th wave, and then start going ham with the cure tree, which is really the only thing that can safely keep the group alive if you reach even 10 or 11 stacks during the J waves. After this, it's just hitting Alexander Prime until it dies. No more healing required. The only thing I do indeed recommend is after Alexander dies, when the tanks are gonna use the limit break for the big hit for the transition, you can use Kerachol and Eucrasian Prognosis just to give some extra mitigation and effective HP to the party. And if Physis 2 is back up after the J-Waves, you can use it as well. So after you get stunned, you have a lot of regens. Make sure to start full HP during phase 4. The same goes for the White Mage with the Medica 2. Here we are finally in P4, the last phase, and the most beautiful phase of the probably, at least in terms of aesthetic. It's not really hard mechanically nor healing wise, there isn't really a lot of healing going on. The first thing I recommend is to make sure you take care of the tank in the beginning. It's gonna take a lot of auto attack damage, so activating Soteria or even giving Aima or Taurochol can be really good. Do not crit stillness, guys, do not crit stillness, really. Go play safe and get a clear. The first damage the group takes is the first share spread. I actually let the group take the first hit without mitigations, and then I used both Kerachol and Olos to mitigate the second one with Physis 2 buffing the healing. It's not really important because the damage is not high. The White Mage is gonna use Lilies here, so as long as you're near full HP even without mitigations, nobody is gonna die in the shares. Here is basically watch at your clone and do the mechanic. There is a little bit of damage during Fate Calibration Alpha when you go into position. So after the boss goes untargetable, here you usually have time for one Eucrasian Prognosis, but if it's Stillness first, I do not recommend greeting the Eucrasian Prognosis and just do the mechanic, because the share will not kill anyone anyway if everyone is full HP as they should be. After you go back middle, you can heal up people with Physis 2 and Ixochol again, but there is no rush to heal everyone because the next damage that's gonna happen is gonna be during Fate Calibration Beta. There is quite a lot of time here before that. Fate Calibration Beta, obviously be responsible and observe your clone to make sure you're not fucking up the mechanic. Once you're in position, before the boss goes untargetable, after he announces all the mechanics, you want to use Panaima and Kerachol when the clones despawn. Basically, it's a good indicator you have to start mitigating. And usually you have the time for one Eucrasian Prognosis. It's really tight after it's intargetable. You cannot really always do that, but if you do Kerachol and Panaima, that's gonna be enough for the group. Here it's one of the really tricky moments, especially if it's spread. If it's share, it's really easy to heal everyone. If it is spread, it's really hard to reach everyone, especially as a Sage, since our heals are only 15 yalms of range. What I do recommend is something we did not do in the clear we're seeing right now, which is having the White Mage dead center of the arena, where the White Mage can use Plenary Indulgence and Lilies or even Medica 2, and will indeed reach basically everyone. I went toward the center and healed, but my heals have very low range compared to White Mage, so I didn't hit our summoner here. And our White Mage was not in the middle when she healed, so she did not reach the summoner as well, so you will see soon what happens to the summoner. So my advice is let the White Mage the middle. If you're not healing with a White Mage, just spread, make sure the spread spots are for healers in the center, and be both close to the center but not too much, so you're sure you can catch both sides of the arena with heals. Healing wise, you can dump everything you have. Eucrasian Prognosis with Zoe, Physis 2, Kerachol, Ixochol, and just whatever. Just dump everything before the share spread and you'll be fine. After that, we have Tank Buster. The Tank Busters in P4 are really up to your tanks. Usually you can invuln 2 out of 3 Tank Buster and only share 1 Tank Buster, which is really easy to heal. Just make sure the tank that's gonna take the finality is full. The Trines are tricky, not healing wise but mitigation wise. The share in the end of the Trine deals a lot of damage. You really want a lot of mitigation. This should be up to your group mitigation plan. For what we did, I used Kerachol on the first Trine, and on the second Trine, both Holos and Kerachol applying 20% but just by myself. But it's really up to what your group is planning to do, because you really want to have the most mitigation spread out on both Trines. And this is basically it for what concerns healing in T, because there's just another Tank Buster and another Trine where you have to apply mitigations. And you can safely heal the share damage after the hit if everyone is alive, just with Ixochol or Physis or just whatever. Like White Mage can use Lilies to fix the amount of red gauge in order to make sure to use a Misery before the end. And that's it. If you got this far, you probably got a clear, and GG for that. Thank you all for watching. I want to remind you, in the video description you can find the detailed healing and mitigation plan we used. It is for Sage and White Mage, obviously, with Dark Knight and Warrior tank, but it can work on different team comp as long as you have Sage and White Mage. The Sage heals can actually work with different co-healers as well. Like if you're playing with an Astro, it probably works just fine anyway, since Astro has at least as much free heal as White Mage now has, so it will work pretty fine. In the video description you can find also a few T sets. You can find the one I used here, which is a minimum piety one, but there are also options with more piety in case you're still doing prog and you may want to have more mana available, especially for P1 and P2. Thank you all again, and have a good day.